Hi guys, welcome to your latest weekly roundup. We're going to have to go at quite a speed to get everything in because an awful lot has happened. It was a brilliant weekend if you're a sports fan, plenty to talk about, so let's dive right in. We're going to start with the cricket. There have been actually 3 great test matches on, 2 of which have reached a result, one of which will be reaching a result tomorrow. Starting with England, they are playing in India. We've bigged it up. It hasn't disappointed. Joe Root won the toss. It was a crucial toss to win. England batted first. They batted big. Root made a double century in his 100th test, which was an absolutely brilliant result. He was really well backed up by Sibley and by Stokes and by a number of other players all making contributions. They then bowled India out for just over 300. They could have enforced the follow-on, they chose not to. What then became quite interesting was as day 4 dawned, they batted. They batted and batted and batted and batted. Pundits, commentators, absolutely everyone was saying, why on earth haven't England declared and given themselves more time to bowl India out? The pitch is getting worse, it is spinning, it is reverse swinging as well, but it's not like the worst pitch anyone has ever seen. It is possible to bat a day on it. So basically, India have closed at 39 for 1 at the end of the 4th day. They're not going to score over 400, which is what England eventually set them to win. So they are just going to have to bat the day out. So it's going to be an absolutely brilliant 5th day to see if they can do so or if England are going to take a 1-0 win in the series with 3 more matches to go. Bear in mind as well, the World Test Championship, believe it or not, which has been on the back burner for a few years and has had quite a few teething issues. The final is scheduled for Lords, and who reaches the final can be influenced by this series. So it's worth keeping that on the back burner as well. Elsewhere, South Africa is still in Pakistan. Briefly, it looked like they might chase down in the 4th innings their total and win, but they were bowled out just short, Pakistan winning by 95 runs. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, they were playing the West Indies. Bangladesh made over 400 in the 1st innings, bowled the West Indies out for 259. Bangladesh then declared, doing what Joe Root did not, and set the West Indies a pretty big total to chase, which, believe it or not, because now 4th innings run chases are a thing, the West Indies did with 3 wickets to spare, chasing down 395 for the win. So it's pretty epic in the cricket, going very, very well, very interesting matches, and from an England perspective, obviously they are the favourites going into that 5th day to close out the victory. If they don't, there's going to be a lot of questions about Root's captaincy. Is it fair, is it not, given the declaration will have been discussed with the coach, with vice-captains, with senior players, etc. So it's more likely to have been a slight group decision. But we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. If they bowl India out before lunch, then it doesn't really matter, does it? This weekend also saw the start of the Six Nations. It kicked off in Rome. France ran out comfortable winners, put 50 points on Italy. Italy were playing with just about 120 caps amongst the entire team, which is pretty unheard of on an international stage. They showed glimpses, actually, Italy. They showed glimpses of playing some really interesting rugby, some very attacking rugby, putting the ball to the backs through lots of pairs of hands. So if they can keep it going for 80 minutes, they might actually be able to build something here. But once again, they couldn't keep it going. France were a quality side, so it was a bit of a cricket score, speaking of the cricket. Then we had a much anticipated clash at Twickenham between Scotland and England. The last time these two met a couple of years ago, it was an absolute barnstorming 38-all draw after England had looked to be comfortably running out as winners at half-time. Were we going to see a repeat? No, we did not. And I tell you what, we didn't, because England were atrocious. So Clive Woodward has said it's the worst performance he's ever seen. I think most people would agree. Take nothing away, Scotland played exceptionally well. They put England under pressure. England were unable to deal with that pressure. They played the style of rugby they wanted to. England did not adapt and impose their own game on Scotland. Scotland just played absolutely brilliantly. England had no answers. They had very limited leadership on the pitch. Whatever Eddie Jones said at half-time did not work. The subs came on, the finishers didn't make a difference. Scotland ran out. Should have been more comfortable on the scoreline than it was. They missed a few kicks, but either which way, Scotland won, and they are now heading to Murrayfield next week to take on Wales. If they win that, they'll suddenly start fancying a punt at the title. As for England, where do they go from here? They have Italy next week. They should still win. Probably not by the sort of margin that France won, unless they have a very rapid revival. I don't know what's going on under Jones. When he first took over, they played a very different style of rugby. Since the World Cup 18 months ago, they've been getting more and more stodgy. It's almost like they want to go back to Route 1 rugby and just play it through the forwards, which is one of their strengths, which is fine, but they're just not actually doing that. They're just not actually executing on the pitch. Yes, they've got some key injuries. Yes, they're missing some players due to other reasons, due to not wanting to live in the bubble, etc. But they've still got more than enough talent to be a force in this tournament, so it'll be very interesting to see if they can bounce back. The match of the first round, though, wasn't either of those. It was actually Ireland against Wales. Ireland went down a man after about 10 minutes. Peter O'Mahony was sent off for a shoulder barge. Completely right decision. Red card all day long. We can't have, in this day and age, anything going, shoulders, tackles, anything, head to head. We've already got concussion lawsuits going on in the game, and if we want rugby to keep going as a sport, it's just got to be stamped out. So, right decision, red card, no defence for him really. Those sort of stricter rules around tackling the head area and around rucks and mauls have been in now for over 18 months. So absolutely no excuses for him. Have to say though, Wales played well, don't get me wrong, they deserved their win, but Ireland were absolutely outstanding with 14 men for the majority of the game. They were actually leading at half time. They were scrumming really well down a man, and to be honest, I sort of really wanted them to pull through and win because they played out of their skins to make up that one-man deficit and came very close to even equalising. They needed a try at the end. Sexton had gone off injured. They had a youngster on, Burns. He had a pump for the corner, he overcooked it, and that ended the game. There's been quite a lot of social media abuse. I don't know why. He had to go for it, he went for it, it didn't come off. Next time it might do. The end. So absolutely brilliant first round of the tournament. Sets us up really nicely. Everyone would now probably point at France as favourites, given that Ireland obviously have lost and England look diabolically bad. Next time out, Italy are in Twickenham, so that should be a win for England to get their campaign up and running. Scotland are playing Wales in Murrayfield. Personally, based on the performance from the weekend and the fact that they'll be so full of confidence and the fact that Wales actually lost quite a lot of players to injury in that match, I do think Scotland are going to win that one. And then we've got Ireland versus France. Can Ireland bounce back from the disappointment? Again, they took on some injuries as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they have the sort of team that can take it to the French at the moment. If France win, it's going to be very difficult to see anyone stopping them doing the Grand Slam. So that's what's going on in the world of cricket and rugby. Some bonus content for you, which technically wasn't from last week, but was from the wee hours of the morning. The Australian Open finally got underway. Yes, the tournament that's had quarantines and COVID cases and mice and all sorts of weird stuff. Even the warm-up tournaments, one of the finals didn't get played. Players were withdrawing left, right and centre. It's been a bit of a farcical build-up, but it finally got underway. Usual suspects were winning in straight sets this morning, the likes of Osaka, who's one of the favourites for the women's, Serena in this sort of epic catsuit she's wearing, she got a straight sets win, older sister Venus got a straight sets win, Halep won in the evening, Kvitova won. So yeah, plenty going on in the women's. Katie Boulter lost in straight sets for Britain, and Angelique Kerber also lost, and she normally goes very, very well in Australia. She was one of the 72 who had to do the hard quarantine, so it is interesting to see that that probably has had an effect on her. She certainly implied it in her post-match presser. However, she was very fair and said it's fantastic to play in front of crowds, and she very much admires Australia's stance on everything. So she didn't sound like she was blaming anyone for the loss, except she was sort of saying it was a factor. There was also an early loss for Gael Monfils in 5 sets, who was very upset in his post-match presser, but wins for the likes of Kyrgios, Raonic, Dimitrov beat former US Open winner Cilic in straight sets. Djokovic and Thiem both won comfortably, and current bad boy Alex Zverev won in 4 sets. There's been a bit of furore about the fact the press aren't bringing up the allegations against him. The problem is you can't bring it up every single time, and there's very little the tennis press can say. They're not specialists on the subject, and neither am I. It's certainly mooted. It certainly is going to be written about, but oddly enough, in presses, people are generally leaving it alone and talking about the tennis. Tonight, or I should say tomorrow, Australian time, tonight, European time, we have the likes of Cameron Norrie against Dan Evans in their all-British first round clash. Dan Evans actually won one of the warm-up tournaments and is looking really, really good. Nadal gets his campaign underway as well. So it will be interesting to see over these first few rounds if those 72 players who did that hard quarantine, if the majority do end up losing early. Obviously, some of them would have anyway, some of them are lower ranked, some of them never play well down under, but obviously people like Kerber generally play well here and were expected to go into the second week. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out and if we get any early favourites for victory. Over in F1, news broke this morning. Hamilton has finally signed a contract to race with Mercedes with a few weeks to go until pre-season testing. Never really in doubt. What was more interesting was what sort of contract it was going to be and how long it was going to be. It is a 1-year deal. Bearing in mind those big rule changes that were supposed to be coming in this year, they were obviously put back due to the pandemic to 2022. Are coming in. So does he want to race in a new era when Mercedes may or may not be as competitive? We will find out as this year progresses. Are Mercedes hedging their bets and maybe thinking about bringing in George Russell? Bear in mind as well, Bottas has only been on a rolling 1-year deal. So Mercedes are keeping their options open. But it's great news. There's some clauses in the contract about sort of joint efforts, sort of charity-wise and campaign-wise to increase diversity in the sport, which is great to see. Elsewhere, if we hop to the States, Tom Brady won another Super Bowl. That's his 7th as the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs. So that was going on in the States, which was obviously quite a subdued event due to COVID. We haven't had any more news from Tokyo this week, which is great because it's quite nice for the athletes to just get on with practicing and stop worrying on a day-to-day basis as to whether Tokyo is going to be cancelled. But there was some interesting press around the winters, which obviously is only next year because of obviously Tokyo being delayed. Scheduled for Beijing, there's some questions about air quality. This happened in 2008 as well for the Summer Olympics when they were held in Beijing. They were absolutely fine. I don't know what the local government did to clear up the air pollution, but they did it before the summer ones. You imagine they'll do the same ahead of the winters. And quite frankly, the athletes right now don't need any more issues. They're already struggling with COVID, with training plans, with issues getting to comps, issues with quarantining. The last thing they need is any more negative press. So yeah, that's pretty much your roundup of the last few days. It's been a very busy one, so it's been a bit quick fire. There's plenty more to talk about. The Australian Open will move through the rounds as this week progresses. England, of course, will or won't get a result in India. And then they've got the second test starting next Saturday, and then obviously another round of the Six Nations. It will be interesting to see who does and doesn't recover from injury in time for that one. So plenty going on in the world of sport, which is absolutely great, cheering us all up, no end. So we'll finish there. I'll be back again with another roundup next week. Enjoy your week of sport.